From FingerLakes1.com and FL1 Radio, this is Inside the Finger Lakes. I'm Josh Durso, and today we are sitting down with Marie Heizmann. She is the Republican running for New York State Assembly. There are, of course, 3 other candidates, and they've all been on the program to date. However, due to the coronavirus pandemic, we're only now getting to chat with her. Marie, thanks so much for taking the time. My apologies on how long this actually took for us to make happen.
That's all right. Good morning. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, so thanks for being here. And first question, why are you running? What is your motivation for running this time?
My motivation for running is that I have seen the great need that we have to have somebody represent us in Albany. I've spent years on the Farm Bureau board as a volunteer, going to Albany, lobbying and advocating for upstate. And the more I did that, the more I saw the need to have our voices heard there. And because I did do quite well at it, I decided that I should take this leap.
Talk to us a little bit about that part of it, the why you want to take on that challenge, because a lot of folks are going to look at this particular seat and say they're going to go to Albany and they're not going to have a lot of power. So what makes you want to take that challenge?
Oh, actually, that's the part where I found that I'm very good. Over the years, as I've gone to Albany to advocate on all the different issues for upstate New York and for farms, I've developed a great network with the downstate legislators, and I've been able to influence them and actually get quite a few bills changed over the years in ways that benefited us. Mm-hmm. So I want to be able to take what I've already done and actually even do more.
Mm-hmm. When you sort of think about when someone asks you what are the top issues, what are sort of the 2 or 3 issues that you really are hardcore focused on, what are those items?
Wow. Coronavirus has changed everything in our world. So right now it has to be the budget, because the budget's in complete disarray. We've lost tons of revenue because of the coronavirus. And then we still have all the upstate, downstate issues. Downstate is pushing their agenda on upstate. They don't understand how we live. They don't understand our way of life up here. So trying to protect the upstate way of life, especially agriculture. And then for a tough third, I would have said our watershed issues before coronavirus. Now, the racial tensions and the issues with the police, defunding the police, might come into that third spot. Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad you brought up the watershed item, actually, because that's different. That's something that we don't hear about every day, especially when we're talking about state politics. Why did that catch your radar so early on?
Oh, well, for one, I've been working on watershed issues for years because of being with the Farm Bureau, and I've worked with the DEC to try to educate farmers and upstate residents about the watershed, because people really don't understand everything they do, whether they're fertilizing their lawn or they're fertilizing a farm field, all that ends up in the lake. Mm-hmm. Everything, if you change your car oil and you go, I'm just going to dump it in the storm drain, that ends up in the lake. Yeah. So we've been working with the Farm Bureau and Cooperative Extension and Soil and Water. I've actually had a group of us that have worked together for over a year now doing educational seminars about the watershed in the area. And prior to that, I was working with the DEC doing educational seminars. So we've been trying very hard, because those lakes are everything we have. If that water gets polluted in those lakes, your tourism's gone, your agriculture's gone, even your villages, that's their water supplies. And it's those lakes are everything. So you have to protect them.
Are you worried at all this time around that perhaps the HABS issue is going to get a little less talk time this year because of the other issues that have sort of really stormed to the front?
It might. I know there's already Community Science, who's one of the groups that we've worked with this group that I have with Farm Bureau and Soil and Water and Cooperative Extension. We worked with Community Science last year to do a series of talks, and I do know that they're doing another one this year. Mm-hmm. They are still out there doing these things, and I've seen it advertised, so I know that those educational opportunities are still there, but whether or not they're going to get the airtime with everything else going on, it's hard to say.
Getting back to work, that's something that's on a lot of people's minds right now, and a lot of Republican voters obviously want to get back to work. But there is a balance to be struck there.
Right.
So what's your approach on that right now, and how do you think the state has been handling it and how it should be handling, obviously, the pandemic?
Well, as I say, the balance is a tough one, how to get that right. I think early on, the state was doing a very good job. I mean, early on, I thought the governor was doing fine. As it has moved on, it seems like the governor has not been doing quite as great a job. It seemed like it got more to be his whim, the rules, instead of basing it on what was happening in signs. He'd yell at his press conference about something being wrong, and then 2 hours later, completely change course with an executive order. So I think that the handling has gone downhill. Overall, I think upstate, we probably should have been allowed to open a lot sooner. I mean, like churches upstate, most of them are not very crowded. Probably through most of the pandemic, they could have been open with proper social distancing and mask and hand sanitizer and all those things. So, and I think that's the balance, is you've got to make sure that you're doing things safely, so that you're not going to spike the infection rate. But at the same time, we've never had a huge infection rate. We don't have that high density here that they have in other cities. We're not a city, we're rural. Yeah. So I think we could have been handled very differently than downstate.
When public health officials in, say, Seneca, Ontario, Cayuga, Wayne, some of these more rural counties, still approach this with the type of urgency that we saw early on when infection rates were higher and when the spread was happening at a much quicker rate, does that concern you at all in terms of what policies could eventually trickle their way up to Albany, given that in theory you would think that some of these more rural counties would be approaching it with a little more of a let's get back to quote-unquote normal?
It would be nice if they would want to get back to normal. I have this fear that we're going to end up wearing masks for the next 20 years, which would be insane. I mean, yes, the coronavirus is real. Yes, it's bad. At the same time, wash your hands, keep your distance, keep things clean. And for the most part, it's the same things you do for the flu, and we manage to contain the flu every year. Mm-hmm. So, I'm definitely afraid that they're just going to go overboard with all of this and start shutting us down every time there's a few cases of the flu or the coronavirus. They're going to say, oh, let's shut everything down again. We can't afford to do that. Plus, it's not a way to live your life.
When you talked earlier about the economic impact of the pandemic, the budget, obviously there's a lot of concern right now that taxes are going to increase in the next 12 to 18 months. And maybe that's a foregone conclusion at this point. But what would you say to those who have that worry and are concerned that it could just become a scenario where every year we're increasing beyond what we've seen in the last 5 to 10?
I can't imagine it could be worse than what we have seen. We already have the worst tax structure in the country. And the idea that we're going to balance the budget on the backs of the taxpayers who have been, the reason you don't have the revenue is because the taxpayers haven't been working. They haven't made the money so that you could have all that sales tax revenue. So to think now you're going to balance the budget on their backs is impossible. You can't do it. So I know that they're going to I know Albany will try to increase taxes, and they've already, if you've seen the fines they've put in place for not following the rules, that's just a way to balance the budget on the backs of the citizens. It's crazy. So I'm afraid they're going to keep trying to do things like that. I know I'll fight it like crazy because I don't believe in taxes going up even when things are good. I think taxes in the state need to go down, not up.
So obviously one of the big issues that's gotten a lot of traction over the last few weeks in particular has been obviously racial equality, policing, the way we've done policing historically. The first question I want to ask about the defunding, the push to defund police or law enforcement agencies, your position on that. Oh,
that's easy. The idea of defunding police, I'm totally against. I understand they want to fund some social programs. We have lots of things in this government we want to fund. You don't just take the money from here and put it over here. The way that we need to do, especially with the way the budget is now and the mess it's in, is actually take a look at what we do, how we do it, the way we do it, and find what are our priorities? It's like when you balance your budget at home. What are our priorities? And if you feel these social issues that you want to fund are important, then put them at the top of the list and make sure that they get funded and do it properly. But don't just arbitrarily take the money from the police and give it over to these things. I mean, to me, that's absolutely insane. You have to actually balance your needs and construct a budget that actually addresses how much money you have and what you want to do, your goals.
Second question on that topic, does policing need to fundamentally change from what people have seen it as over the last 20 to 30 years?
I come from a law enforcement family, so this is a very tough balance for me. My grandfather walked a beat in Chickasha, Oklahoma. I have cousins now that are troopers, sheriffs, they're deputy sheriffs all around. I think most law enforcement officers, when they go into the profession, they want to help. They want to serve and protect. And as long as that is the goal, and we make sure that the police are trained and they get additional training to make sure that their focus is on that, I think we're okay. I have seen somewhere it has seemed to shift away, and I know I hear it from my cousins, because people don't walk beats anymore. Cops don't do that. They only respond after something happens. There's not that community interaction like there used to be. So I think that we maybe need to look at having more of that community type policing, go back to serve and protect instead of just having the police showing up after something happens.
Would you support having the scope of what law enforcement responds to reduced, so they aren't put in as many situations that could potentially create a bad outcome?
I don't know how you can actually reduce. When they get that 911 call, they don't know what they're going into. And to say, well, we think this one isn't okay, we aren't going to send the police to this one, or we're not going to send them over, that could be hairy. I mean, even if you think it's just a little neighborhood dispute over two people fighting over, who put their, pools over the property line, their little kid pool or something, you don't know what that can, bloom into as people, emotions and everything happen. So I don't think you can really make that determination, because they never know when they walk in what it's actually going to be. It might seem like nothing, then ends up being huge and something that they think was horrible, and they get there and it really wasn't that big a deal. I don't think there's a way to do that.
When you look at the last few weeks and sort of how that shifted, what this campaign and what the race has actually looked like, has it moved the needle for you in terms of potentially shifting some of the issues and some of the concerns you had going to Albany, in February versus present day?
Yeah, it's completely different. When I was looking in February, it was more that upstate, downstate, not understanding how we live, them coming up with from downstate edicts that just don't work up here, and them basically push it off on us what they don't want. And so it was very different. When we had issues, some legislator downstate at one point, wanted to make it so that you couldn't dock cows' tails, which, some farms do, some farms don't, but you don't want some edict out of Albany telling you what you can do on your farm for a practice that is done for safety. So you have that. Those were the kinds of issues we were looking at before, along with the fact that, yes, we had a high tax structure, and there was a $6 billion deficit, but that was debatable how bad that really was. Now, well, we know that the budget's totally in disarray. The revenue's not there. We have this new way of life, and yes, there are going to be changes, and how are we going to live with this? Because the vaccine, while they want it soon, history shows they don't get vaccines that fast. So there's going to be, that issue's going to continue. And then, while the racial has bubbled up in the past, and so have the issues with police being too overbearing at times. There's been complaints of the police using too much force. Those have both, but they haven't gotten to a head like they have this time with the protest. So, now you have all these newer issues that you're having to deal with that have definitely come to the forefront.
Biggest issues facing farms right now. Obviously, we've seen the numbers over the last several years with small farms disappearing at a faster rate than the larger farms. Yeah. Is that a concern for you, especially given that in the rural parts of the Finger Lakes and upstate New York, small farms are a prominent part of the economy? They are.
Small farms are a prominent part of the economy, and they come and go very fast. Unfortunately, it seems in this area, it's like 93% of farms in New York make less than $10,000 a year. So it's a very huge issue that, those farms, if they disappear, we need them, and we don't want just a bunch of big, huge, factory farms. And up until recently, we really didn't have any of those big factory farms. We had some large family farms, but it became very aware with the coronavirus that we had an actual corporate farm come into the area in Oneida, and it didn't go so well. Yeah. We don't want that kind of culture. We want to have it stay family-owned, local farms if we can. And it has been very tough with the policies in the state for farms to stay afloat, between the taxes and the regulations and all those, and then the fact that we're just not we don't have a competitive advantage. You go down to Pennsylvania, their minimum wage is $7.25, their cost of living is 25% less. It makes it a lot tougher for the farms up here to survive. But you can't take the land with you if you decide to leave. So farmers can't really leave because of the weather like all the other residents are. They have to stay.
Looking forward, obviously, we're really close to to Election Day, but there's going to be some lag between when Election Day comes and goes, or special Election Day comes and goes, and when the results are in. What do you plan on doing over that period of time between now and when we find out what the results are?
I'm actually not sure. I've been thinking about that because I think, I do my own Coffee with the Candidate. I do a podcast every morning at 7:30 live, and then 9 a.m. on weekends. And I've actually been trying to decide, do I keep doing that until I know? Or, what do you do during that period? So I'm not really sure. And I realized, I had to take a leave of absence from the Farm Bureau, being Farm Bureau president, while I'm running. That's required in our charter. And I realized as I was driving here this morning, on the 24th, I'm not going to know if I'm back going to be president or whether, I've won this little primary. So now, until those results come in, I'm still on leave. So there's all these things that, you really don't know. It's going to be a weird couple of weeks.
All right. And where can folks learn more about your campaign if they're still curious?
You can go to AnnMarieForAssembly.com. You can go to Anne Marie for Assembly on Facebook. There's also a Twitter and an Instagram. Like I said, Facebook Live every morning on weekdays, 7:30 a.m., 9 a.m. on weekends. I'm live. You can ask me questions. Feel free to type them in. I love it when people actually comment.
All right. Anne Marie, thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Inside the Finger Lakes is a production of FingerLakes1.com digital media. The show is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you listen to shows like this one. It's hosted by me, Josh Durso, and if you want to hear archived episodes, visit InsideTheFLX.com. If you have an idea for a show, email it to josh@FingerLakes1.com or follow me on Twitter @FLXJosh, where we keep the conversation going all week long. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you back here next week.